Welcome back to the Alec Lewis Show. I am your host, Alec Lewis, here today, recording this on Wednesday, October 16th. You guys will probably hear this or watch this on October 17th. It is a preview with a good buddy of mine, Colton Pouncy, who covers the Lions for The Athletic. Has done it for multiple years now. We went to Mizzou together, University of Missouri. He was a year older and wrote for the Columbia Missourian, and as you will hear me say, and it is not hyperbole, learned a lot from him. Read a lot of his stuff, always thought he did a really good job. I think Jeff Pearlman, who's an incredible author, once said that like reading Colton's kind of like reading jazz at times, and I would agree with that. So it's been really cool to get to cover the NFL with him at the same place and just have the utmost respect for the job that he's done over there. He did a story on Jamison Williams a few weeks ago that was phenomenal, and then his stuff last year during the playoffs was really, really good. So really excited for you guys to hear this preview. He has a pulse of that team like very few others do, and so I think you'll enjoy it. In the meantime, while we're here, please like and subscribe. It helps the channel. It's been as I say every time, it's been awesome building this. I enjoy it every time. I enjoy it more right now when I'm more healthy than I was earlier this week, but I'm glad I made it through. So please like and subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, it really helps us. If you're on Apple, Spotify, you can rate and review, and that stuff helps too. And then please also check out the stuff at The Athletic right now. I did a story earlier this week on Keenan McCardell, the Vikings receivers coach, and kind of what he provides to the team and to that room in particular. And then Thursday, I've got another story that, again, if you're listening to this on Thursday, please go to The Athletic and check it out. I think you guys will really, really, really find that interesting and enjoyable. And so, appreciate you guys being there. Without further ado, let's hop into it. We're going to talk about this game, Lions-Vikings, in Minnesota at US Bank Stadium on Sunday with Adam Amin and Greg Olson, who I think are both very, very good on the call. Colton and I go pretty deep on the Lions and kind of this matchup and back and forth. So, thank you guys for being here. Let's hop into it. All right, Colton, welcome to the Alec Lewis Show. Probably a long time coming. I'm going to start, as I told you, for where everybody listening to this is probably going to want me to start for sure without question. Missouri football right now, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I don't want to talk about what happened 2 weeks ago. That just didn't happen in my mind. I was on bye. I wasn't paying attention.
I was in football. London, yeah, non-existent.
Yeah, I wasn't watching, so it didn't count. That's how I kind of picture it. But last week, back on track. Got a big win against a powerhouse in UMass, and feeling pretty good. I don't know why we're not top 10 again. I feel like that was a pretty convincing win, but only a matter of time before we're back in the playoff picture, I think.
They play Auburn this weekend, which is going to be kind of interesting. Obviously, it's around where I grew up, but Missouri better win that game. We'll segue a little bit for the people listening, as I will intro you. You cover the Lions, and we went to Mizzou together, and I've watched you and read your stuff and watched you do a lot of good work that has motivated me for a long time. So it is always fun when these matchups happen, and it's cool to kind of get to chat. I'm curious just to start, like, vibes around the Lions right now, given obviously they've been as good as they've been, but then with the injury of Aidan Hutchinson, like, can you describe the feeling around that place with kind of the odd both positivity and negativity that's probably gone on of late?
Yeah, that was one of the weirder post-game locker rooms I've been a part of, just the scene in there, because you had this pretty convincing win, right? A 47-9 just like throttling of the Cowboys, a team that I thought was like solid. I thought I thought the Lions would win. I didn't think it would be a 38-point win like it was. That's pretty insane. So you have this, complete game, 47 points on offense. I think the starters, before they got pulled, scored on every possession. The defense limiting them to 3 field goals, 5 turnovers in that game. That was really the complete effort that this team thought they could put forward, but they just haven't been able to do yet this season. So to do that on the road in Dallas after losing the last 2 matchups there previous years, it was pretty much everything you wanted, and yet Lions fans and really the team couldn't really fully appreciate it, knowing what happened to Aidan Hutchinson, their star edge rusher. Broke his tibia, fractured tibia and fibula in that game, and he's going to be done for the season. they're holding out hope that maybe he can, his body heals in time for a Super Bowl appearance. But like, you got to get there, and it's hard to do without him on the field helping you and rushing the passer and doing what he does best. So in the locker room, really, you had guys that were like, yeah, we got 5 turnovers. You see the corners in the back corner of the locker room, Brian Branch and Kirby, the safeties with them. You see the offensive line talk about just all the trick plays in that game and how fun that was to be a part of. And then you'd ask about Hutch, and like the smiles disappeared, the tone shifted, and it was like, man, we got to move on without this guy. That's going to be tough. So definitely a weird scene, and I'm sure the city of Detroit kind of mirrors what I saw in Dallas after that game.
Yeah, I mean, and I like, granted, have not watched the Lions a ton, but even early in that game, I was just like, they can't block this guy. Like, this guy, yeah. And he is a relentless. I mean, the motor like kind of reminds me of Max Crosby. I don't know if that's like right or wrong, but he's just like relentless. This doesn't apply so much to this weekend, which we'll obviously talk about in depth. But I wonder, I mean, now with the loss of him, like how likely is it, do you think, that Brad Holmes, a guy who has not been afraid, obviously, to fortify this roster seemingly in whatever avenue, like how likely is it, do you think, that they swing elsewhere? I mean, whether it's like a big time swing or whether it's maybe a lower level type addition.
Yeah, I think they got to do something, and I think they kind of realize that too. It's hard to account for the loss of Hutchinson, especially when Marcus Davenport, a guy they signed, played for the Vikings last year. They signed to be a dude on the other side of Hutch this year. He's out for the year too. Only played 2 games, which is kind of the risk that you run when you sign that dude. So both their starting edges are out for the season. So it's not like we can just say, Marcus will make up for it. No, he's gone too. Another guy that they like, John Kaminsky. He's been around for a couple years. He got hurt in preseason and might not be back till December. So their depth is pretty thin right now. It's going to be tested. So I feel like they do have to make a move. They signed Isaiah Thomas from, I think, the Browns practice squad. So, we'll see what he can do here if they get him up to speed in a couple weeks. But I do think they have to make a trade. And the question is what tier of player they can really realistically get. I don't think Max Crosby is going to be available. It doesn't sound like the Raiders want to trade him. I know Mark Davis spoke yesterday and said that's not happening. And Crosby likes it in Vegas. The reason why Lions fans are sort of infatuated with him, other than the type of player he is, was born in Lapeer, Michigan, played at Eastern Michigan, is on record saying if he ever left the Raiders, he would want to play for the Lions. So that's sort of like the disconnect there. It's like you got the guy saying all the right things. He's not available. So you might just have to move on. Another guy, Trey Hendrickson from the Bengals, I know he wanted a new contract, and there's some talk that maybe they move him. It doesn't sound like the Bengals are an organization that likes to make in-season trades. It's not really their speed. And also, he's just a guy that, like, why would you trade your star edge rusher right now? Like, you're, 2-4, but, like, you can win some games. You got an easy stretch coming up, schedule. They're not far out of a playoff spot, so I don't know why they would make that move. So I'm trying to convince Lions fans, like, they're not going to make a big splash. That's not really Brad Holmes' style anyway. But what they can do is get a guy like maybe Zadarius Smith with the Browns, a guy that had 60 pressures last year, I think around 6 sacks, a win rate of 18.5%. So he's a productive player. He can set the edge. He can defend the run. He obviously played for the Vikings. So he's a dude that can come in and help you right away. And he can't do everything Aidan can do, but he can get you halfway there. I think if you do that, you rely on some other pieces on the back end, a much improved secondary, solid linebacker unit. Like, you can probably get by, but it obviously hurts losing a difference maker like Aidan.
I have so many thoughts on that. One thought is the Bengals not being willing to trade in season is, you said it's not their speed. Like, what? And you're probably right, but it's like, how is that not your speed? Like, that's just such a weird, like, type of thing. But so it's interesting. Yeah. The other aspect is, like, Max Crosby feels like the most Dan Campbell type of relentlessness type player you could find. And then Zadarius and your mention of Marcus Davenport, it was like, I remember week 1 or week 2 watching Marcus Davenport being like, oh, maybe he produces this year, and then maybe not, because he obviously has not been able to stay healthy. And Zadarius, I mean, he was extremely productive here in 2022 across from Danielle Hunter and rushing on the interior. But I think for him, it's always just been like a health thing. Can he maintain the consistency down the stretch? So very interesting. I'll stick with the defense. I was going to start offensively, but since we're on the subject, I mean, just what has been your read of a defense that obviously it looks like they fortified the secondary a pretty good amount. I mean, obviously players that people here are familiar with like Anzalone, and I know they just paid Aleem McNeil, but just defensively overall with what Aaron Glenn has done and with the personnel they have, how different of a defense is this from the last couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start when Hutchinson was playing. I thought this unit was top 10. They were top 10 in points allowed. I mean, that defensive line I thought was going to be the strength, especially with the healthy Davenport too. Like, they complement each other so well. Davenport was crushing the pocket opposite of Aidan. Aidan was getting around the edge. I think he still leads the league in pressures, even though he has played one less game because of a bye than some other guys, and also only played one half of that game last week. He's got 45, a win rate of like 38.5%, which is ridiculous.
Absurd.
Leads the league in sacks with 7.5. So, like, I mean, you have those two guys on the edge. When they were healthy, I think that was sort of the blueprint coming into the season. Like, we're just going to have these two giant dudes just, like, crush pockets. And then in the interior, they signed DJ Reader this offseason from the Bengals. He's just a space-eating nose tackle that makes everyone around him better, defends around a high level, and will just eat up double teams so other guys can get free. And that was working. Levi Onwuzurike is a defensive lineman they drafted in 2021, second round. He's been hurt like pretty much every year of his career. Healthy this year, and he's just been wrecking stuff. He's got, I think, 17 pressures from the interior. It's tied for 11th in the league right now.
Because Brad Holmes needed another good draft pick. I mean, come on.
It's so crazy when you look at that 21 draft. They got Penei Sewell, Aleem McNeil, who just got paid, and he has 16 pressures this year, right behind Levi. Levi was in the second round, Aleem was in the third. Derek Barnes was a really good player for them before he got hurt a couple weeks ago, the linebacker, and then St. Brown. So like
Glad you saved that.
Sorry,
yeah.
I should have mentioned him earlier, but like, yeah. Oh, by the way, the Pro Bowl All-Pro wide receiver in the fourth. So like, that's really a defining draft for the Lions and Brad Holmes. And all these guys were playing well, and I think that defensive line, when you had the full assortment of guys, you could argue it was one of the best in the NFL, if not maybe the best. But obviously losing those two guys, it hurts them. It changes the equation for them. So I still like what they have in the interior with Levi, with Aleem, with DJ, but they got to find some help on the edge. And I do think like the secondary, as we mentioned, it's much improved. They added Carlton Davis, traded a third-round pick to the Bucks for him this offseason. He's been pretty solid. Drafted Terrion Arnold out of Alabama. He's had some rookie growing pains, but that's expected for a young corner. And the two safeties, Brian Branch, another Alabama guy, awesome player. I still have no idea why he fell to pick 45. That made no sense to me. I don't get it. I know he didn't run the fastest 40 time, but what teams get so often with safeties wrong is that play speed and game speed is what matters more than 40 times, because they're not running like, you're not running a 40-yard dash more often than not in games, right? Like, you're running sideline to sideline. You're trying to diagnose things quickly. He's got a high football IQ, one of the smartest players I've ever covered. Like, and you see it each week in and week out. His interception against Dak Prescott, where he kind of hovers around the flat and then drops back and picks that off, a pass that was going to CD, that probably would have been a touchdown if he didn't make that play. That was the perfect example of what he can do. And Kirby Joseph, I know he's not super well-liked around the league, especially in Minnesota.
He's definitely not well-liked here.
Yeah. He's one of the best ball hawking safeties. He's got 4 interceptions in 5 games. All of them have been in the end zone, so they've been pretty timely. And he's playing at a high level. I think he's playing at a Pro Bowl level right now based on just what he does in terms of range in center field. He's got speed to close and just a natural skill for the ball. So, like, those two safeties I think are maybe the best safety duo in the league. And I think the secondary is going to have to be the new strength when the defensive line is hurt. And if they can get one guy like a Zadarius Smith, I think you can kind of, tape it together. But it's obviously not the same without Hutch.
2 questions. One, why does Brian Branch have a mouth guard on his helmet?
We've tried to get that out of him, and he always is like, I'll tell you guys one day, but not now. So I don't really know. And it's green too. It kind of sticks out. I don't know if he wants people to know where he is at all times. I feel like that's sort of counterproductive, but like, you can spot it from the press box.
I watch it, and I don't know if he did that at Alabama. I don't really think he did. I could be wrong. Maybe you would know probably better than I would. But, yeah, your point about him falling to 44 or 45 or whatever it was, like, it made like, I watch Alabama every weekend. You're like, this guy can play, and he can play in the slot. He can play at safety. It is and of course, again, like with Brad Holmes and the success they've had and Detroit's had, it's like I mean, the guy fell to them. They drafted him. Smart decision by that front office. The second question I had, and it really applies to this game specifically, like the Vikings, as you know, because you've covered these same games, like the Vikings have thrown the football well against Detroit from the time that Kevin O'Connell got here. I think they're averaging like 340 plus yards through the air since they played Detroit. And a lot of it, I mean, Detroit, I think, has tried some different stuff. They've played man. I think there was one game where there were like 8 defensive holding penalties. So I guess part of me wonders, how do you think they will try to play Minnesota this weekend? How much man coverage have they been playing? And is that the approach that you expect them to probably take against this receiving corps that has been pretty dang good?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, watching the different quarterbacks that have beat the Lions over the years or just like gotten them, put up numbers against them, that's why I think Kevin O'Connell is one of the best coaches in the NFL, at the very least one of the best offensive minds. The way he's able to get the most out of every quarterback he trots out there is like remarkable. I watched Nick Mullins throw 400 yards on the Lions' head last December or whatever it was, and that was just, I mean, that goes to show you just the coach he is and how good he is at developing guys. But in terms of the game plan this week, the Lions have been playing more man coverage. I think if you look at the splits, the first half of last season, they're running a lot more zone coverage. And Aaron Glenn is not a zone guy, and he hates playing zone. If he could play man 100% of the time, he would. You can't in the NFL, but he would. But he had to because that was sort of the personnel that he had. And then in the second half of the season, he said, why are we doing this? No, we're going to get back to my style. We're going to make these guys play man. We're going to bump and run and play that type of coverage. Didn't really work out well with Cam Sutton. He is better in zone, and that's the guy they had out there last year. But this offseason, they went out and got 2 dudes that can play that. And that's Terrion and that's Carlton. And so those guys have been playing a lot more man this year. I think they're probably closer to top 10 than they were last year versus maybe like 15th to 20th range. So they're playing a lot more man coverage. I would imagine they're going to start blitzing a little bit more without Hutch, and that's something Aaron Glenn has done in the past. So there'll be different ways to try to dial up pressure without that dude and while still playing your preferred style of man coverage. So if I had to guess, that's what the game plan would be. But, man, Justin Jefferson just torches these guys every single time they play. So, like, every time. There's one game, actually, I think it was 2022. It might have been the first time they played that year where Justin Jefferson was held to, like, maybe less than 50 yards or something like that. And I think everyone out here and maybe a little bit nationally were saying, oh, man, Jeff Okudah, he locked up Justin Jefferson. I'm like, no, they were, like, double teaming him, like, every play if you actually watch the film. Like, it wasn't just one guy. And then the next time they played, he had like 200 or something. So it's hard to defend that guy.
Well, it's funny because before I asked that question, I said, the Vikings receiving corps have been pretty solid. It's like, you idiot. It's Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and Jalen Naylor, who has ascended to like really like a de facto number 2. And
I covered him at Michigan State.
Yeah,
Naylor,
yeah, which is and you and I have talked about this and others who might have been at Michigan State at that time, but to have Jalen Naylor, Jaden Reed, Kenneth Walker. I mean,
Keon Coleman was a freshman back then.
I can't imagine how they won that many games. There's no way. It doesn't make sense at all. But no, I mean, I think Justin and this Vikings offensive staff, they look forward to these matchups because they seem to do pretty well against man coverage. Now, your mention of like Detroit maybe bringing more blitzes, to me, for the people listening who are Vikings fans, like I think that's going to be pretty interesting. Can the Vikings offensive line decipher some of those blitz looks? Can they hold up against them, specifically on the interior with Ed Ingram, who's given up the second most pressures among guards in the NFL, and Blake Brandel, who struggled 2 weeks ago against New York? Like, that is a question. And then to not have Aaron Jones as a pass protector in the backfield, there's going to be a lot on Ty Chandler and maybe Cam Akers, and we'll see if Aaron Jones plays, but if he doesn't, definitely those other guys to hold up in pass protection. So going to be interesting. I've saved like my favorite part of this whole matchup for last, obviously, but Ben Johnson against Brian Flores. I know Dan Campbell talked today. Like, has he talked about Flores, what they're doing? Just what is your excitement for what this probably is? Well, I think it might be the best offense in the NFL against the best defense in the NFL, frankly.
Yeah, it's going to be a chess match. Dan hasn't gotten too much into it. He does respect Flores a ton, I know. It'll be interesting. We talked to Ben Johnson on Thursday, so that'll probably be the one where we get some answers there. But, yeah, it's going to be fun, man. I mean, the Lions are obviously coming off a game which everything was firing on all cylinders. The offense put up 47. It really looked like they were just playing a JV team out there. I mean, that's the best way to put it. Like, they were just running up the score. They were trying everything, too. Like, it was so funny. Dan was like, yeah, we wanted to use everything in our arsenal. Like, how many times do you hear a coach say that in a game,
Yeah.
right? You know? In the locker room, Taylor Decker was like, yeah, we want to unload the clip on these guys. And they did. And, like, you see Dan Skipper lining up at receiver just in that game. You see Taylor Decker go in the end zone, try to catch a pass. He dropped one. He would have had a touchdown. You see Panay Sewell. They ran a hook and ladder to their right tackle, up 37-9 in that game. That's the most absurd, disrespectful thing I've ever seen in an NFL game. And yet, that was the Lions. And if you asked Dan about it, and some of the question was like, oh, you worried you showed too much? Like, should you have saved some of these plays for the Vikings next week or another team later in the season? And he goes, I mean, no. Our job is to give everything we have every week, and if we use something and we got to figure out something else, we'll come up with something else. Like, that's our job as coaches, is to identify what works and what doesn't and go back to it or find something new, which I thought was a great answer. So that'll be a fun matchup. One thing in particular I'm looking forward to seeing is, like, I know obviously Flores and the Vikings, they love to blitz. I think they have like the third highest blitz rate in the NFL. Normally that would be a good recipe for, Jared Goff-led team, but he's actually performing pretty well against the blitz this year. I think his EPA per dropback is third highest in the league. Actually, wow. Darnold is second, so there's something there too. So they've been handling blitzes pretty well. I think the backs do a good job of picking things up and keeping their eyes out, and the linebacker core and things like that. So it's going to be interesting to see. These are two strengths. Like Flores is doing over there defensively, what Ben Johnson Lions do offensively. It's going to be fun to watch for sure.
The coolest thing about Detroit's offense to me is like it's just like the perfect blend of speed and strength. Like when you the offensive line, is Kevin O'Connell said like twice this week publicly, he thinks they're the best in the NFL. The Lions offensive line, which it's obvious praise, but it's also like he wouldn't say if he didn't really believe it. And then to have the speed of like a Jahmyr Gibbs, Jamison Williams, Roll Tide, by the way, and then to have the strength of, I'm watching Tim Patrick like just all over the field, and it's like, again, the Detroit front office and the offensive staff, like to identify that guy and to go get him and add him to this offense. And then, oh, by the way, like you already have Amon-Ra, like we said. You have a David Montgomery who runs like he wants to, like he's like a bulldozer. I don't really know.
Yeah.
It is tough. And you said it, but like Flores, it's funny because I think the perception, and a lot of it's based off last year, is that they do just blitz all the time. But in reality, this year, what's been interesting, and I just think nationally it's a little easy to overlook unless you like kind of just observe week to week. Like they're playing these like weird quarters coverages where Andrew Van Ginkel's like underneath intercepting passes on a weekly basis. It has been so interesting to watch. And so I cannot wait for the matchup. And I think Ben Johnson, how he's still there and not a head coach, to me, it just blows. Like, how? How?
He told us, it was coming back from the NFC Championship game, their flight back from San Francisco. He's on the plane, and he's thinking about something that Dan said a couple years earlier, where they were 1-6 and going through some rough patches there in 2022. And Campbell assured them, like, yeah, here's where we are. We're in the Arctic. It's cold. We got icebergs around us. We're navigating this, and we're trying to get past the storm. But I tell you guys, I see the sunshine. I see the light. We're almost there. And here he is on the plane after, a crushing loss, knowing that he has to interview with the commanders in like a couple days. He's thinking about a speech from his boss like a year and a half earlier. And to me, that kind of speaks volumes about, one, how these guys feel about Dan Campbell as head coach, but two, just where Ben Johnson is in his career. Like, he realizes, like, I'm in a really good spot here in Detroit. I got the best offense in the NFL. I got a guy I like coaching under, a good friend, a mentor, and I like where I'm at. Like, yeah, I can start from scratch and build something of my own vision, but I'm going to have those opportunities down the road. Like, this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to have the Detroit Lions play at a Super Bowl level. Like, this has really never happened. And so I think that he sees the opportunity. He saw it back then on the flight. And that was really the turning point in his mind, is based on what he told us. Like, I want to be here. I want to see this through. And so to have an OC that's been around here for now 3 years and been on staff under Campbell for 4, that's pretty rare. Like, there are not many play callers and offensive minds on staffs that stick around for this long. Normally they get a head coaching job or they're fired. So there's no in between, and Ben's been in between there for a while, and I think it's allowed the offense to be at this level that it is now, where you have not only the play caller in place, but also the talent, so many weapons in St. Brown and J-Mo and Laporta and Tim Patrick, as you mentioned, and two backs. They can beat you in so many different ways, and I don't know if Ben Johnson will ever coach an offense like this again. And I wonder if he realizes that and the opportunity that he has to maybe do something special here in Detroit. That would be my guess, but who knows what goes to that dude's mind.
I mean, it makes me think like it's similar with Flores' defense. It's like people always talk like, could they replicate it if you hire someone on the staff or if he becomes a head coach? Like, but replicating this stuff, it requires hitting on the draft picks, the quarterback, making the right trades, like the signings, like David Montgomery work out. Like I think sometimes, and I've thought about this with the Vikings this year, like the chemistry is just right. And like I think finding that might just be like by spontaneous. Like I'm not sure if you can really build that. And you know, Wes Phillips, the Vikings offensive coordinator, said something pretty interesting yesterday on Tuesday, and he's like, you know, I think subconsciously or not, some of these divisions like that become really good, the teams kind of start to like look similar to one another or think similar to one another. And I think the Vikings, they wouldn't say that they've stolen the physicality that Dan Campbell has instilled, but like a priority for them was being more physical, running the ball more effectively, and it's something that we've seen Detroit do. So, I can't wait for this one. Obviously, get you out of here in a second, but do you have a feel? I mean, it's early in the week. We don't know about T.J. Hockenson, Aaron Jones, all these different options. I'm sure in Detroit, we'll see. But what is your feel coming into this environment that will be pretty? I mean, you know, U.S. Bank, but it's going to be pretty raucous in there on Sunday.
Well, first of all, I hope those two dudes play because I have them on my fantasy teams. First and foremost, the more important thing. But yeah, man, I think it's going to be a physical battle. I think it's going to be a chess match again, as we mentioned. Just the minds that they have, the brain power on both staffs, I think is really impressive. I love the Vikings organization. I think they do a really good job, and they're just a smart crew. But in terms of this game, it's tough because I don't know what the defense is going to look like without Hutch. This will be our first real look. I know when he went down, they did a good job of keeping the momentum going, but that was against the Dallas team that had already mailed it in at that point, so I do think they'll have their hands full with Justin Jefferson defensively, even though I do think their secondary is better. That guy's one of one in this league. If Aaron Jones plays, I think the Lions do a good job of defending the run. I think they're fourth in run defense right now, top three maybe. So if they can make them one-dimensional and make Sam Darnold beat you, then maybe that's your best chance of winning. You can give up 300 yards if you're limiting them in the red zone, which the Lions do a good job of too. So we'll see. If I had to guess, I would say I think the Lions are, playing as close to complete football as they have in a long time. And I think they have momentum, even without Hutch. We'll see what happens defensively, but I think the offense has enough to kind of figure some things out. They played well against Flores' unit last year, so I think they feel pretty confident they can do so again. But we'll see what happens on Sunday.
Yeah, to me, I mean, I think the early part of the game is going to be so critical. Like if Detroit is up 10-0 and they can run and pass, for the Vikings defense, as good as it's been, as much as it's been on the field, the more that they have to defend both aspects of what Ben Johnson and that offense is capable of, I think the harder it's going to be. And then, Sam Darnold I think the Vikings will air it out. It's Kevin O'Connell's MO. It's like the joke here is like he's going to throw. Like no matter it is what it is. And I don't really blame him, especially against a team like you mentioned that stops the run as well as they do. Now, if Aaron Jones plays, it's a different deal, but should be interesting. Colton, this was fun. I appreciate it. Appreciate your Mizzou report and you saying that beating UMass was a gigantic win for them. As we all know, it was. Good to see Eli Drinkwitz making the right moves in a game against UMass. But I will see you this weekend. Looking forward to it as always. And, thanks for hopping on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on your such creatively titled show. I don't know how you came up with that. That's so
I mean, I'm that brilliant where, It's plug your podcast while you're here. Plug it.
Yeah. We got a Detroit pod called Welcome to Detroit. It's on Patreon.
That's creative, too.
Listen, at least it was a reference to something. Dan Campbell, 2021, beat the Cardinals in the locker room. He said, hey, man, welcome to Detroit. To kind of set the tone for what that was going to be. All right, so it's a little bit more creative than the Alec Lewis Show. All right, get over yourself.
Awesome. Thanks, Coach. Appreciate it.
All right, man.
And that'll do it for the Alec Lewis Show. Hope you guys enjoyed the conversation with Colton Pouncy and him trolling me at the end. But seriously, as I said at the top, has just been really, really, really cool to get to kind of kick things back and forth with him in terms of covering the NFL and covering two teams that have been arguably two of the probably best four in the NFL thus far this year. And just to get to learn from him, read him, and go back and forth on stuff has been an absolute blast. And it's cool that you guys hopefully kind of picked up on just how much we enjoy going back and forth and just talking about this stuff. So as always, like I said at the top, please like and subscribe if you're not subscribed already. It really helps us out, and we'd be appreciative of you doing that. In the meantime, check out the day-to-day stories over at The Athletic covering this Vikings team. And, enjoy this weekend's games. I'm pumped for Saturday. Alabama plays Tennessee. Georgia plays Texas. I will have my phone on Do Not Disturb and will be on my couch probably enjoying the heck out of those games. And hopefully you guys dip into some college football too. But we will be back next week. This was episode 25. We'll be back with 26 and got some guest ideas for next week beyond just a preview that I think should be pretty fun. So stay tuned. Keep locked and loaded to the Alec Lewis Show and enjoy the weekend.